If you feel that there are not enough films about the First World War that are really gripping tales, you should absolutely have to check out 1917. Hi, my name's Drew and welcome to another review video on Flying Wiener. It's been out for quite some time, but I've finally managed to watch 1917, and straight off the bat I must say it is an absolutely incredible film, not only for what it's actually about, but just the way the film was made is truly impressive. I watched all sorts of extras on the Blu-ray. You may or may not know, but this film was particularly talked about because it was made to look like it was all done in one shot. We'll get to that later. As per usual, we will briefly talk about what the film is about, and later on we'll get to all the stuff about how the film was made. The film is set in the First World War, 1917, April 1917, and it is actually based on something that actually happened, namely that the Germans, they faked a retreat, I'll call it, or at least the Allied forces believed that they were faking a retreat, when in reality, as I understand, the German army was just repositioning themselves. It may have looked like a retreat, but to them it was just a repositioning. Anyway, the problem is that while this is all going on, there's a battalion in the British Army that is planning an attack for dawn the next day, and they have 1,600 people, and they do not know that it's basically going to be a trap by the German army. And the story is about these two very, very young corporals, these two young guys, and their job is to deliver a message to that battalion, ordering them to stand down and to not attack at dawn. What makes it particularly of interest for one of these two guys is his name is Blake. He has an older brother who is actually in that battalion amongst those 1,600 men, so he has a personal stake in it. Basically, they have got a day to cover quite some distance through enemy territory, through no man's land, and somehow manage to reach those guys, and that's basically what this story is about. As per usual, I will stay rather spoiler free. In particular with this film, it would be very, very easy to spoil some really heavy things. At the same time, it's a shame that I can't talk about them because I'd love to talk about them. Nonetheless, this is going to remain spoiler free. Speaking of the story itself, what I find rather strange is I found it quite hard to believe that to save 1,600 people, the British Army would only send two guys and not just, you know, two veterans or something, but two young corporals to go and save these nearly 2,000 people. I thought that was a bit strange. I mean, it does seem that these kind of things, lone messengers, etc., were a popular thing. They were used a lot because telephone cables, etc., were actually damaged and destroyed during the war. But still, I feel that surely they would have sent out at least a few teams or one bigger team, but just two guys, that felt a bit silly to me. But the whole thing is actually based on the director Sam Mendes, his grandfather's stories from the First World War. So while not quite to this extreme, that person did actually do similar things during the war, and they have obviously been quite exaggerated a bit for this story to make it a dramatic telling. As you can imagine, they go through enemy territory, so there's a big sense of tension throughout the film. Don't worry, it's not tension from the first to the last minute. So the script and the story does follow basic storytelling structure where you have a sort of ebb and flow of tension and climaxes, etc. So don't worry, but generally speaking, the whole thing is very tense, of course. And when you picture the First World War and you see a lot of it here, the trenches, and what an utterly terrible environment it must have been to just exist in for God knows how long. And very dreary, they don't try and sugarcoat it at all, so you really see the nitty-gritty of the First World War here and just how horrific it was. I personally also feel that it's a complete waste of a war. It's often overlooked compared to the Second World War for, I would say, obvious reasons, but the First World War, really, when you look at all the details of it, truly very horrific, and in some ways maybe even more so than the Second World War. And this film also makes it visually quite understandable that it was that way, because you've got the trenches, just the thought of all these guys being such a short distance away from each other, and just spending all day trying to shoot each other without neither side really making much of an advance, you know, not really gaining territory. It is really easy to see how pointless this whole thing was, even from a really strategic or combative perspective. So we see all that, and as you can imagine, the story has quite a sense of urgency. Blake, because it is his brother, just from the word go at the start, as soon as they're given this mission, he is very determined and he's strong. You can tell that he's even trying to sort of keep his breath steady while he's doing it. He's obviously very, very unnerved by the whole situation, and it makes it tense from the first minute. And then, of course, there are many things that happen, which again will not be spoiled. We visit very, very different landscapes throughout the thing. You've got ruined cities, you've got huge open, just lovely grass fields and all sorts, and we get to see quite a lot of this French countryside. Now the story, it's very well made. Like I say, you have ups and downs in it. It's perfectly balanced, it's really good. What I like in particular is that this is really a story about these two guys and their mission. So the whole film is designed around us being in their shoes. And this really starts with the camera itself. As mentioned briefly in the intro, you've got it designed and shot in a way to make it look like it was one shot. Obviously it was not, but if you look at all the extras and how this film was made, it is actually an incredible achievement, because they went to such lengths to make it look that way. And there are actually sections in the film where they were shooting ongoing for a few minutes at a time before cutting, actually. So it is, even without the being actually a one-shot film, there's still, you can tell that a lot was going on and that scenes were not really short for the actors. They also, the way they designed it, before they even started filming, they had storyboards, they had small models, and they explained that they actually went out and rehearsed all the scenes to figure out how far the actors are actually going when they're doing the scene, because all the sets were built afterwards. So they plotted out every single detail to know how long they need the shot to be, how long they need just the land, the strip of land to be, just so that they could make it all work. So much work went into this, but I feel that it's great they did it. It's really an advantage of the film, because you feel so much into the camera. Most of the time is sort of looking over the shoulder of these guys. I mean, obviously we see other things as well, so it's not like it's a computer game where you just have that viewed throughout the whole thing, of course not. But a lot of it is like that, and we really do feel that we're on the ground with them. So whether they are hiding behind a wall, or they're taking cover somewhere, or jumping over something, we're always there with them and absolutely feel like we are part of them. The camera also, it goes really low down if they are low on the ground, and the perspective is always very interesting in that way. At the same time, we're always shown the important things ahead, the objectives that they have on the way, the waypoints, etc. So, and that is also one thing. They choose really beautiful locations. So the whole film, it is quite a juxtaposition to obviously the horrors of the First World War, because we've got all these beautiful landscapes and they look really great. You just want to spend a day there, have a picnic or something like that, and it is really quite contrary to what we're seeing happening on screen. So visually it's shot beautifully, and just the landscapes themselves are absolutely amazing. One thing that needs to be mentioned with this is the lighting. Lighting is obviously something that is very important. In this film, they shot most of it, or even all of it, outside actually. So they were dependent on the weather, as you can imagine, because it's a one-shot film, at least in execution in theory. They had to actually pay attention to which weather they had, and when they had to redo a scene, they had to make sure that they had the same weather. So they had days where they couldn't shoot because it was all of a sudden very sunny. They wanted just a sort of cloudy day, and they used that to rehearse instead of actually shooting. And it's really, really quite breathtaking. You have one location in particular where lighting is just phenomenal, because the scene takes place at night, and we're in this ruined city, I'll call it. And what happens in the film is flares are shot up, and as you can imagine, it being pitch dark, the flares, they create all this light for us to see. And with ruins in particular, you've got windows, you've got all sorts of objects that cast shadows, etc., and just seeing all this on screen, how it's done and how our character gets lit up by these flares as well, and how you see the action just through all this lighting background, it is quite breathtaking. So I fully understand why this film won Best Cinematography at the Oscars. It looks absolutely incredible. It's really wonderful to see. Acting wise, it's very interesting. You've got two young guys. I only knew one of them, so the two main characters, one of them is played by George Mackay, the second one is played by Dean Charles Chapman. Him I have seen before. He played Tommen Baratheon in Game of Thrones, if you remember that, so the little boy king, sort of towards mid to end of the series. Anyway, but I had seen him, but generally speaking, both very young actors, and they are absolutely the focus of the story. Both do a really, really great job to portray. I mean, it must have been horrible being a young guy in this war, and surely so many lives were pointlessly lost in that war. And to think about these young guys going on a mission like that is quite a mind bender. And not only that, but they, as actors, they're holding their own against really a very fabulous British cast. I mean, you've got Mark Strong, you've got Andrew Scott, you've got Benedict Cumberbatch, Colin Firth, Richard Madden, so you've got all these big names. They have got rather minor roles. I don't feel this is a spoiler because obviously the story is absolutely focused on these two guys, and as they're travelling alone, you know, obviously there's not really much room for many other people, but these other fabulous actors are in here as well, deliver their typical really, really good performances. I like Mark Strong in particular. He's got a very sympathetic character, and I just thought it was a really good few moments with him where he sort of gives good moral support to our characters. Another standout thing from the film is the music. It is very, very dominant at times, but not in a bad way or so. But it's so well written. The score, it just grips you in a way that you really pay a lot of attention to. I've seen so many films where you, at the end of it, realise that you weren't even listening to the score because it just didn't really manage to grip you. This one definitely does. I will say at times it gave me sort of a weird feeling that was kind of not what I was seeing on screen. Like you'd have a very tense moment with a gun battle, one person against one person, and the music to me felt like it was more like just from a random action scene instead of a tense thing where it could be over any second. And you had a few such moments where I felt that the music wasn't quite as fitting to what we saw on screen. But then again, you have particularly the start where these two guys, they start off and you have them going just through these fields and then through no man's land, and the music has got this sort of eerie quality, this sort of dreamlike state, I'll call it, and it fits what we're seeing on screen absolutely perfectly. It really enhances the whole tension of the whole thing, and the scene I mentioned with the lighting, with the flares, that also has some incredible music to go with it. Just that whole scene. If you watch only one thing from the film, you really should watch this place where you have the ruins at night and the flares going and all that. Just the music, the acting, the action, the lighting, it all goes together so well. It's one of the best design scenes I have ever seen on film. Really, really wonderful to watch. And this ruined city and everything else, they built all these sets. An incredibly huge amount of work went into just creating all these environments, and they're so highly detailed. Generally speaking, I could not tell that they were sets. They're so well made. What I could tell sometimes was bad CGI because you've got explosions going on battlefields, etc. And at times, or people flying through the air, of course, as a result from this. And I felt that the CGI wasn't always on point, so sometimes things looked very, very fake. You have one scene where a character jumps down just from the bridge into the water, and that was really obvious CGI. And I didn't quite like that, but I get that. There's just very, very few CGI shots. They did pretty much everything practically, so, and that's fine. It's just, I have to mention it, it's a review after all. But the set's really wonderful, just the whole design of everything. It felt so alive and so real. So, those are my thoughts overall. Without spoiling anything of the story, it's really a wonderful film. It is a film about the First World War, so you could see it as depressing in places. Overall, I don't feel it's a depressing film because we do have a very hopeful message that is being carried throughout the film, and there are very, very many really strong emotional moments in there. So I feel that it's a very good balance. I don't feel it's depressing. It's a really great film. Obviously, you'll enjoy it a lot more if you generally like films that are set in one of the world wars. You've got incredible acting, scenery, the lighting, the phenomenal camera work. Everything in this film really makes it outstanding. It's a great experience. So I highly, highly recommend that you watch it. Well, thank you for watching this review video on Flying Wiener. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel for more review videos, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.